I'm Thomas, and you're listening to the Racing Podcast, where today we are going to talk about the All Gravel Awards. Specifically, I invited JP, aka John Peter, aka the Stable Cyclist, to discuss our ballots for the first round of the voting process of the All Gravel Awards. So I mentioned the awards already in last week's episode, but in case you missed it, here's the quick rundown. We are going to do post-season awards, similar but in a bigger, better, nicer, more elaborate version than what we did last year around, where Paul and I invited Amanda Naumann-Schiek and then did a public voting on Instagram, and we upgraded the process. We assembled a board of voters, our expert panel, so to speak. They will do the initial nominations and votes, and then in roughly a week from now, there will be a public vote based on this first round of expert voting and nomination. And so, currently people have to fill in their ballots. I'm one of the people voting on the ballots, and as is JP. And we had a bit of conversation on Instagram the other day, chatting about one or two awards. And then I said, why don't you hop on and we record an episode to talk through our ballots, our picks, who we think should be voted for. And this we did. It was a fun one. Also not a super short conversation, but there was a lot to hash out. So I hope you enjoy it. Before we get to the conversation with JP, however, just a quick update on the personal end. Maybe you've already seen it, but if not, I started to write about gravel racing on the Escape Collective, which at least in my mind is one of the best places on the internet that covers cycling. And now I'm contributing there regularly to write about our favorite pastime, which I think is really, really cool. As I said, I really like their work anyways. And then on the other hand, it gives gravel a bigger platform, one of the best ones in cycling. So that's really a cool situation. If you didn't come across it yet, I already said last week that there is a piece which by now went live about the whole situation between the Rift, the race in Iceland, and Klaasmark. We covered this on here extensively. There was also the piece that got a fair amount of traction. I was actually almost surprised by it, about the rumors about a Keegan Swenson to Specialized transfer. If you listen to this podcast and you're one of our German-speaking listeners, which many of you, or at least a fair amount of you are, then you probably listened to the episode where Paul Voss and I talked about the super teams, the rumors on this end, and that was back in September, which was the first time that I heard about this. And since then, I've talked to various people, and it seemed really like many people had come across this rumor. And then the more you read, the more you listen to, the more people in the first weeks after Paul and I did the recording, I heard others alluding to this going on without mentioning anything. And then just last week, Chris Millman, who you already know from being on the podcast before when we talked about his Badlands experience, he essentially made it public in a Blue Sky message. And so with all this stuff leaking out, I figured it's probably time to write about it, and specifically to scenario plan for what if this is in fact going to happen. And that I did. It's on Escape Collective. I think it's a pretty nice piece, so go check it out. I will put the link in the show notes as well. But there are two things that I want to just put on the record with respect to this piece as well. And the first is, and that is really important to me personally, that I would not have written about this story if it wouldn't have leaked by others already. So it was really in the moment when I saw Chris Millman putting out his tweet, his Blue Sky post, whatever you want to call it, that I decided I'm now going to write about it. Like, when Paul and I talked about it in German, I knew that our German listeners would hear about this, but it wouldn't necessarily make it into the English-speaking gravel world. And because then I started obviously asking around and trying to get some confirmations, which at the time I didn't. And I don't want to be in the breaking news business and definitely not in the gossip sharing business. So that is why I left the story as is and said, look, once it goes live, then I can talk about it. And of course, I started thinking about what it would mean. But I didn't write about it publicly anywhere since we released the episode in September. But then the second thing I want to also make clear is while that is all based on rumors and there is no official confirmation yet, I wouldn't have put it out there if I didn't believe that it is very likely to happen, and the people at Escape Collective also confirmed this using their network. So yes, rumors, not 100%, but I would say I'm pretty convinced that it is going to happen. And lastly, just before we jump into the conversation with JP, if you dig what we are doing here, please make sure to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, leave a review, comment. If you listen to this on Spotify, there are now comments. That is cool. And share it with a friend. That helps us a lot. Any help is much appreciated. And with that, let's jump into my conversation with JP and talk about the All Gravel Awards 2025. And now I'm joined by JP, better known as the Stable Cyclist. Hey man, good to have you on.
Yeah, how are you doing, Thomas?
Doing pretty well. Here it's the afternoon. I may or may not be in an afternoon low as we speak, but this is going to change because we are about to speak about the best, most exciting sport in the world, gravel racing.
Yeah, man.
And like when we set this up, I had to think about a podcast that you recorded with Beyond the Peloton's Spencer Martin, which probably was the first time you showed on the air how deep you can go when it comes to cycling and cycling nerdery. And I hope you can bring this game to our little awards and ballots show as well, because we have some thinking and discussing to do. And as you are the guest, I will give you the option to pick which award we should tackle first today. You don't get to pick between all of them because, for instance, we cannot start with the MVP or Most Valuable Rider award. That's one we need to keep a bit in our back pocket. But between Most Improved Rider, Most Exciting Newcomer, and Most Impressive Performance, where should we start?
Well, I for sure want to start with Most Impressive Performance, because when you sent me the ballot, I knew before I even had to think about that one, I knew both my male and my female hands down what I thought it was. And funny you should say that about Spencer and being on Beyond the Peloton. That conversation is a regular phone call between Spencer and I, where we just fall down a rabbit hole of nerdery, especially on the road. So I live for these kind of conversations, even though this is not what my channel is or what my content is at all. I live for these kind of conversations. So let's get going.
So who on the men's side were, I mean, the way you phrased it, actually, you didn't even have candidates because you already knew from the get-go who to pick. But did you consider a few people after all, or if not, who was your only choice?
Well, I think there's obviously always going to be candidates if we think about Keegan at Leadville. But he has such a stranglehold on that race that it doesn't really feel like, my apologies to all the other fellers, but it doesn't really feel like anybody else has a chance unless Keegan's bike falls apart. And so that one was out. I immediately went to the Traca 360 this year, and what I'm gonna kill these European names, and I apologize, but I believe it's Tobias Kongstedt. What he did there, I don't know if the American audiences always understand what the Traka represents in Europe. It is essentially the Unbound of Europe, and Traka would even want to argue that it is Unbound of Europe, or it is even the biggest race in the world. And you look at how many pros in America are going there now, just to race. So like everybody's there. It's not like this is a one-off somewhere in Arizona or Texas, not trying to speak down those races, but this is, everybody shows up at the Traka, and he attacks with, I think, 100. He attacks with 5 hours to go.
Yeah.
Solo. He goes solo with 5 hours to go, and he holds him off. And not only does he hold him off, he wins by like 5 minutes. And that's unbelievable on the men's side to see that kind of performance in that field. Was just, it honestly, like the Traka 360 arguably has the best coverage, live coverage. I would put Unbound, and I would put Gravel Worlds.
We get to this award in a moment.
Yeah.
So,
but I would say like they have some of the best coverage. It was terribly boring to watch because he went and nobody could come with, because it was such a dominant attack.
Yeah. So luckily we always get 2 races in one, so we could watch the women, which was a bit more exciting. But no, that was an impressive performance, and I even ended up apologizing to Tobias after the race when I had him on to do a recap podcast, because I didn't write about him as one of my pre-race favorites, which was an oversight for sure, as it turned out. Let's for a second talk about Keegan at Leadville. I didn't even have it on my short list anymore, because frankly, to me, it doesn't qualify as impressive anymore. It's just what Keegan does. He goes and he wins Leadville. Maybe Simon's right at Leadville I would consider even more impressive than Keegan's. I think if he beats the course record, then we are talking, and it probably qualifies for this again. But no, wasn't even on my short list. I can tell you.
Here's a question I have for you about that. And like, you're a basketball head, like you're total NBA head as far as any conversation I've ever had with you. And I remember as a kid, Michael Jordan's dominance was so impressive. And, or maybe this is a but, at a certain point, I just kind of wanted to see somebody else win. Right? It didn't take away from how impressive it was. It doesn't now. As I look back, I'm like, man, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. But it was fun to see, like you said, Simone give a real crack at it this year at Leadville. And I think for all of us, as much as his racing is exciting, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, I think for a lot of us, it was like, there's somebody there. Like something crazy might happen this year. And so it doesn't take away from who Keegan is or the dominance of what he's doing, especially at that race. But I think there's a little bit of boredom setting in with some of the gravel fan base of like, oh, it's Leadville again. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't even have to jump to basketball to see this effect, because we can just watch road cycling and what Pogacar is doing there, and how people start to be bored.
Yeah. And Chris Froome, and like we can keep naming the names that were dominant, and especially in the Tour, the French do not like when somebody is just dominant to the end.
And then I think the main difference, or at least one of the main differences between basketball and cycling, if we want to go there quickly, is basketball. Like if you have a dominant player, and you have this game that is structured in like 24-second at max possessions, then you get to see a whole lot of what the person is doing. And this can contain crazy passing, finishes, and so on, which is very different from watching cycling, where for hours on end, maybe you just see guys paddling, and then there is this one impressive attack. So it's a very, very different viewing experience. So even if Michael Jordan or Kobe or whoever bored you with their dominance, the spectacle of watching them was on a different level than watching the best cyclists in the world be dominant.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm kind of like, to cue in a very American phrase, I'm talking out of both sides here, in that like we're saying this about Keegan and that it's not exciting. And then I'm saying the most exciting performance is this guy who goes with 5 hours left. And, we were just enthralled because it wasn't who we expected. And so I think there is definitely some recency bias in this pick, for me at least, because, what he did was really impressive. And at the same time, it's the kind of thing we've seen at Leadville for years on end. And we're just like, I'm bored with this. But yeah, for me, it was Tobias.
But mind you, it's impressive and not exciting performance.
Yes.
Maybe then you would pick another pick. So Tobias Ettracker was on my short list as well. I will already give away, it is not who I ended up picking for this one. I think another one that you need to mention for this award is Cam Jones at Unbound.
Sure.
I mean, his breakaway with Simon that was established so early as well was just cool to see. It was cool television. And we had a bit more excitement than we had at Trucker because Cam wasn't solo for the longest time. That kept it interesting. But I have probably a somewhat unexpected final selection, and it falls in the same category of not actually that interesting to watch performances like Tobias, and it was Mats Würz-Schmidt at the European Championships, where he had a pretty strong field of contenders as well, and he soloed away from several World Tour professional road guys, some of the bigger names in European gravel, and just put minutes into them. The broadcast, which started late into the race, was not very interesting because it only showed Mats for the entirety of the live stream. So they didn't even have multiple cameras there. So it wasn't fun to watch. But I think given the title, the jersey that was at stake, and the dominance of his victory, it was, to me, the most impressive performance that we saw this year.
All right. Yeah, the Cam Jones one is interesting too, because most people don't, even though there's wall-to-wall live coverage, most people don't understand that coming into Alma, the first water stop, not the first aid station, but the first water stop, he had been dropped because he stopped to take a wee, or he got behind, or he was between groups. And the only reason I know this is because I had footage of him in between groups, and I was kind of like, why is he here? So he had to chase back on to a group that was flying that day. And then once he got on, then he shortly attacked with Simone, and away they went. So yeah, really impressive performance from him as well. And very Vuelta like coverage a la 2005 for the European Championships this year.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be like almost a Cam Jones staple, to be honest, because I heard similar stories about dropped Cam Jones coming back at so many races. I remember vividly from the Oregon Trail Gravel Grinder, where I did a podcast later on with the runner up, and he was telling me, Skylar Taylor, that is, he was telling me, look, he was coming back, and sometimes he dropped in climbs and came back and had mechanicals, and it seems to be what Cam Jones does.
Well, he does well with it, so.
Yeah, indeed he does. So let's talk about the women's side, most impressive performances here.
Yeah, well, again, I'm going to be kind of boring because I felt like there was one so far out in front of everything else, and that was Haley Batten at Sea Otter. And the reason that performance, to me, aside from the fact that she went really early and she just hammered everybody, it was the fact that she's not really a gravel racer. She just kind of parachuted in. She's, there's no argument discussing her class on the mountain bike. It is so impressive what she has done. Silver medalist in the Olympics. But to see her show up at a gravel race and pretty much just put everybody over her knee and smack them. I remember being, while some of these long bomb performances can be boring, I remember just being transfixed that day of like, I can't believe what she's doing. This is so impressive.
Definitely was an impressive performance. It's also on my short list, which in this case is actually a rather long list. But I have a few more that I think are worth bringing up here. And we will then just play the little game of you having, if you wouldn't have picked Haley Batten right away,
Sure,
which one of the other ones you would have picked.
Yeah,
and then I will tell you my selection. So top of my list, there is Axel Dubois-Prévost at Gravel Burn. I don't know how much you followed Gravel Burn. I did intensely because I wrote about it on a daily basis, and just because it was so much fun to watch it. And she started right away with 2 stage wins over her competition, which, by the way, included Ashley Moonman Passio. I think it's fair to classify her as close to legend status on the road at the very least. And then she, during the middle of the race, when she was sitting rather firmly in the lead of GC, she had a nasty flat, was almost 10 minutes back after that stage, and then bounced back on the final stage, distanced everybody, including Ashley, who also had herself a nasty flat this day. But I think Axel, if I remember correctly, was sitting in fourth or fifth. No, pretty certainly in fifth of GC at the beginning of the final day. And all her other competitors had minutes on her as well, and she distanced everybody and raced to the lead. So that was one performance that I think needs to be mentioned. And then we come to Carolina Migon, who is actually on this list twice, because for one, there is her Unbound winning performance.
Yep.
Being away in the breakaway with Cecily Decker and Lauren Stevens, and then dropping one after the other, even having shared some water with Cecily Decker, who had none left anymore. But just 4 weeks before she won this race, which happens to be the most important in the world, she won the second most important gravel race, at least the one that is winnable by actual gravel people, in the Trucker 360, which once again was a very cool, very impressive performance. I remember vividly. So she was away in a 3-man or 3-women group with Axel Dubois-Prévost and Sarah Sturm, I believe, was the third one. And then they entered a single trail section, and there was a bit of rumbling afterwards of like age group man giving her an advantage. And I really went frame by frame in the recap that I wrote. And the conclusion that I came to is, no, she just sent it in this ultimate single trail section of the course and put a significant chunk of time into her two competitors. So these are the two Carolina Migon performances. And last but not least, I have Rosa Klöser's Lauf Gravel Worlds performance on this list as well, because Rosa at Gravel Worlds, so essentially it was the carbon copy of what had happened at the Core 4 the week before. Yeah. She gets away together with Gerike G. Schreurs, and they together put a lot of time into everybody else. Remember, it was also pretty mud-coated, peanut buttery at Lauf. And then I think it was, like the kind of sprint that you get after hours and hours of racing, where she then managed to distance G by, if I remember correctly, a few bike length even. But very impressive ride as well. So among these four, who would be your second best performance of the year, so to speak, or second most impressive?
Well, I had said earlier, I didn't think about anything. I just thought about Haley Batten. No, that's not true. I thought about Rosa at Lauf Gravel Worlds. It was really impressive, especially because she had just, like, 1 week before, or wherever Core 4 falls, 2 weeks before, 1 week before, right in that range. She had done the same thing, like you said. And Lauf Gravel Worlds is a lot longer. It's not, it's over 150 miles. So it's a different, kind of moves into that different range of races. So I definitely thought about her. Carolina, and if we're going to talk about Carolina, we have to say Dzień dobry, because she is Polish, and I've spent some time there. Her performances were really exciting, and spoiler, we will talk about them more in a bit. But if I had to pick, I would say it was the Gravel Burn XL and what she did there, because stage racing and gravel is just such a different animal. Like, it's almost like a different sport. And you look at the people that were on the start list of that race, like you mentioned, it was not just like your normal international traveling gravel racers. There were a lot of road pros there. There were people who could really hit, and she did it to do it. You win 2 stage races early. That's great. But then to do it consistently over that long period of time was really impressive. And so to me, that if I have to not pick Haley Batten, I'm going to pick what XL did in Gravel Burn down in South Africa.
It's where I landed too, because stage racing just is a different animal, and it's so cool, not only from a narrative standpoint, but also just from being able to unfold these performances over multiple days. And then, like, whenever you get to see a bounce back win on the last day of a stage race, that is always memorable per se. And then in this field, against this competition, in the first edition of a race that it stands to reason is going to be one of the bigger ones in our little lovely sport. Impressive. And it kept off a year that was already a pretty strong showing by her in a fashion that I will remember for a long time. That's for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we covered the most impressive performances. Where should we go next?
Well, let's go to most interesting setup.
Okay. Let me guess. You also had a very clear winner on the men's side.
I didn't even have to think. I don't think my fingers would let me type anything but what I put down on the men's side. Now, certainly, there are some very interesting setups going on in the men's side, and I have to admit fully to you and to everybody listening, my time at races is spent exclusively on the men's side. Like my filmmaking and the work that I do in the actual gravel world proper is 100% on the men's side. And it's 100% with the person that I picked for this. And that's Chase Wark. I think he has the most unique setup. There are certainly other people. Daxton Mock ran some interesting things this year. There's a U23 named Job. Job, I apologize. I don't remember your last name off the top of my head, but also running some very unique things. But I followed Chase Wark around through Unbound this year, and there was not a 1 hour section of time at the expo where he was not either being interviewed by the top media in the world. And we're talking like Cycling News and Escape Collective, and anybody that was there was coming to take pictures of his bike and ask him about this like spaceship that he had designed to ride on. And throughout the year, he didn't really change it up. You know, I with the exception of there were a couple races late in the year, like at Gravel Nationals, where he did not run the spaceship essentially, but Gravel Worlds, Unbound, all the big ones, he's running the full disc wheel in the back. He's running this wacky hydration thing out front. And it was a wild time, man.
I think it is the obvious pick, and it is the correct pick as well. Actually, me like you, that is the one thing that comes to mind. I had to think, and I haven't yet written about my ballot there, so technically speaking, I'm not yet done. But I think the harder work will be to find other setups to put on the short list, like Lachlan Morton's Unbound XL setup was interesting. I don't, maybe Keegan's Leadville dropper bike will warrant consideration, but yeah, like.
Well, in the like when you wander into things like Unbound XL or the Long Voyage at Gravel Worlds or the Traka, like the 560, is it, or Badlands, like those bikes start to get into just like bizarro world. Like you could pick any bike and they're going to be really weird.
Yeah.
And I think like what Chase is doing and a little bit what Daxton did at points in the year, they're so weird because it's in the professional, like pointy end of the like normal gravel race distances, I say in quotations. And that everybody's running pretty normal things. And even like Keegan's bike at Leadville, like everybody's running a drop bar setup for the most these days. Yeah. And like everybody's running 2.4s still on a hardtail frame with, you know, drop bars. And so then it's like, well, this is not really unique. This is what everybody has realized is the technology. Whereas what Chase is doing, most people are still standing around and like laughing at it and being like, that's not, what is that? and there's like a very, to me, important scene in the Unbound episode that I made about Chase where Ben Delaney is talking to him, but they're not talking about the bike. Ben Delaney is talking to him about like navigating criticism online. And it's like, you know, Ben is this larger than life, goofy guy. And in that moment, he's just like very soft and just like almost like your uncle with his arm around you, telling you like how to navigate this, because it is so different. And there is a lot of criticism for how that setup is.
Which is honestly weird to me.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that is one of the very cool aspects of gravel, that we are not in or at least not fully in a regulated UCI world, but we have a space for the tinkerers who want to play around, dabble with the setups. And I hope it remains like this, but I'm also fairly confident that besides like some rules regarding aero bars. But even that, like this rule made Chase come up with the workarounds. So
Yeah.
that's lovely.
Yeah, well, and I know now from things I've heard in the background, a lot of the races are coming up for workarounds for the workarounds with their rules, and like things like your hands can never leave your handlebars proper, and some of those things. So it's the sport's going to continue to evolve,
Yeah,
and there's going to continue to be thinkers like Chase who are going to just try and find advantages on the bike setup, but also continue to look at the rules and say, where are the loopholes in this that I can find advantages? And not everybody looks at the world through those eyes. And so that's kind of what makes this fun.
So on the women's side, who did you give consideration to?
The women's side was harder because I'm just not in that scene as much. Like I'm not walking through like pre-race. For example, at Unbound, I'm not in the chute of the women's race looking at everybody's bike as I'm filming and like hands-on. And I know that you're saying, well, JP, I'm not either. I'm in Germany. But I looked at more things like I know Hannah Schell mentioned a bunch of stuff with like aero sensors and testing and different things that she did this year. The gains that seem to be being made with a unique setup on the women's side is much more. There aren't like these huge outliers that we can see. It's pretty streamlined. And so Hannah was the one that really popped out to my mind. And even when I did a lot of digging and research, she was still the one that came to mind. And so that's where I landed with her. And I think it's unique. And I know I can speak to this because she was just on my show, the Stable Cyclist podcast, and we actually talked about this aspect. She's 6 feet tall, and like finding the most optimal setup that's aero is going to be like exponentially different in how she prepares a bike fit compared to some of the other women who are 5'4". And so that's a challenge, and that's a real advantage she's trying to pull back. And so I think that makes this, like the work she was doing, the things she was trying to figure out, makes it that much more interesting to try and think about how she needed to level the playing field.
She's also my vote in this, especially because I think with the media that she did around this build, which included, as you mentioned, the aero testing, and like for those who don't have it top of mind, like she ran a suspension fork in the front and downsized her tires and picked, I don't have top of mind, I think 45s even at Unbound, but with a suspension fork, because that was on, like in her testing, the fastest option for her. And I believe we are going to see more suspension in gravel racing going forward. And in that sense, it is almost a sign of what is most likely to come, in my mind. There were a few interesting setups that I also gave some consideration to. There was like Kate Courtney at Leadville. She put like the bibs on the fork to shift gears there. And similarly, Rosa Klöser did at Core 4, where she put them in on the sides of her head unit, because there she ran aero bars, and then she was able to essentially never get out of the aero bars. And Haley Hunter-Smith at Migration Gravel, where she ran this Trek full suspension drop bar mountain bike, which was also interesting. But yeah, Hannah Schell also got my vote, even though admittedly I would love if we would see some more out there builds in the women's field as well. And I frankly don't know why we don't get them. It's something last year Amanda already raised when we did our awards last year. a bit of progress. I see some more also coverage of the women's builds, but I think we need more tinkerer women.
Indeed.
So let's jump to the most exciting newcomer award if you are up for it. And I will say first to the women's side.
Okay, I gotta find my ballot here where
I will tell you first who I had on my short list, and then you can let me know if I missed somebody who you gave consideration to. But before we get to the short list, actually, can I tell you why I think that is such a cool award?
Sure. Absolutely. It's your show. It's your show, Thomas.
Thank you. That award is like so gravel coded, because in gravel we live in this space where we don't have a pure gravel development pipeline and all the talent comes from this pipeline, but essentially people come from all areas of cycling, and some even from other athletic endeavors into gravel racing, and then they are there. So we can get to a situation, and in fact this year, at least in my book, we did get to a situation where you have a legit legend of the sport being in contention for the same award as somebody who is new to the scene and a fresh face. And I think that is very gravel.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Who are your short list? Who was on your short list?
Number 1, Annika Langwart. I think she is a 6-time world champion, 5-time in marathon and 1 time in one of the other mountain bike disciplines. Even like in 2019, when she was on the road, her only professional road year ever, she did super, super well. I think she was 2nd at Strade Bianche, 3rd at Flèche Wallonne, and 4th at Amstel Gold Race. That is not too bad for your
That's not
first
too bad
road racing season. And then she has like multiple national championships and so on. So she is a legit, very great bike racer. Obviously, I think by now most people in gravel who are not mountain bike pilled as myself, I fall in this category as well. But we learned since then she retired, became a mother, worked as a dentist.
I was going to say she's also through all of that a full-time dentist. So
yes.
like
I think
the most.
My understanding is she quit working as a dentist again this year, but I'm not 100% on this. But be that as it may, so she definitely did this in the last years. Maybe even as we speak, she's working on some teeth, and that is the background story of her. And then she started to ride gravel, and Santa Val, the European season opener, came, and she just dominated that race in a fashion that was frankly scary. Like on the first stage, there were 2 ladies only, and it was like a short 80-kilometer stage. And probably you've heard of the 2 ladies who were the only ones able to hang with her. One is called Rosa Klöser, and the other one G. Schröers. But she won in the sprint against both of them, even though, and I don't mean this in any way negatively, but she is, I think, 40 or even older than 40 by now, Annika Langwart is, and the other 2, well, she just outsprinted them. And then on the second day, she put 12 minutes into the second-placed Axel Thibault-Prévost. Now, that is an early season race. And form can vary because people train differently. And I think few people try to peak at this stage. And I don't know what the preparation was. But at this moment in time, because we are talking about, for one, newcomers, and second, excitement. And that was bloody exciting in my book. And I was wondering, look, did Annika Langwart now come to dominate the sport? Is she taking over at this point? That was number one on my short list. Number two, Cécile Lejeune. She finished the Lifetime Grand Prix, her first ever Lifetime Grand Prix, in 5th overall. And well, her start in gravel, which was the season prior, which is also important because there is a certain eligibility condition thing that we have in all these awards. But she only did one race in the year before on gravel, which was Oregon Trail Gravel Grinder, which she happened to win as her first ever proper gravel race, which is not a bad start. And then she showed, at least on the consistency end this year, that she is definitely there. In terms of the Lifetime Grand Prix, I think her unbound 5th place was definitely the strongest showing there. The peak excitement meets performance moment in her season was outside the Lifetime Grand Prix, however, and it was her battle with Sophia at this year's edition of Oregon Trail, where she ended up losing to Sophia and finishing in second, but she finished all stages in second, and thus the GC as well, on like 2 minutes 30. When I had her on the pod after the race, she told me a bit about like how she was struggling with watching Sophia's post, because Sophia, of course, was sleeping in an Airbnb and not in the tents like everybody else was, and she was posting her sleep scores in the morning, and well, Cécile watched them, and yeah, that was pretty exciting. She also finished the season good enough to secure a 5th overall in the Grand Prix, which is strong. And like an aspect that I think one also needs to consider when it comes to exciting newcomers is, how do you just connect with the scene, with the community? And I think Cécile did a very good job there.
Yes, 100%,
as well.
100%.
She's one of the better content creators. Like, her Instagram
Absolutely.
game is really good. She has a Substack that is worth reading. And I think she is now a household name among gravel fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
The third racer that I considered is Hailey Preen. She jumped into the Lifetime Grand Prix this season, finished in 9, had a strong result at Sea Otter in 4th. She also went ahead and won a African, I think Namibian, UCI gravel race. And she performed pretty darn well at Gravel Burn, where she rode to 3rd overall, even though she had so many mechanicals, flat tires, and other mishaps like wire wrapping around her wheel. That she definitely lost time over and over again due to these. But she ended in 3rd as well. I will stop here and ask you, are these all the riders you considered? Did you consider somebody else?
I considered somebody else. I think what you named off is a really good list. Obviously, Lejeune is on the tip of everyone's tongue for like newcomer and somebody that was on the forefront. And like you said, the content creation from her is incredible. And I don't, she is willing to talk about a lot of the things in women's sport that not everybody's willing to talk about. And that makes me really excited, because I obviously, like, I love storytelling, and I love transparent storytelling, and I love storytelling that helps everybody. And that's what she's doing. Yeah. And so she's definitely on my list, but I, again, fall back to my Polish friend here, Carolina. And what she did, like I didn't have any idea who she was before Traka. And then I still like didn't really have a great idea of who she was mid Unbound. And I'm like, why don't I know who this person is more? And when we talk about like excitement and if we're just going to look at results, I feel like nobody crashed the party more than she did this year with those 2 performances in a row. Is her content creation is good? I don't know. But her on the bike stuff certainly lit the world on fire for about a 3-week period in May at the 2 absolute biggest races that exist in the world. And so she was my pick for most exciting newcomer.
I think that is a very American perspective, to be honest, because I mean she won the Trucker 360 the year before already.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm not so sure that if I would look at the eligibility criteria of the award, that she would actually fit in there, because I believe in 24 she already raced the majority of her season on gravel. I could be wrong though. I didn't check her, but it's funny, like how definitely she definitely crushed the party in the States with the Unbound win, and that put her on the map. And I mean, look, the fact that she is now joining the Lifetime Grand Prix next year, along with also Rosa Klöser, by the way, will make for a very, very interesting Grand Prix.
Well, I need to amend. I just went and read. I didn't read my rules on this one carefully enough. I need to amend my pick then and just go with Lejeune, and I'll have to resend these to you, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, check, or I can also check if she actually happens to be. I mean, she worked full time still last year, so maybe she didn't do the more than the minimum number of races. But she is legit. And if she would be considerable for this award by the rules, which I, by the way, created, but be that as it may, then definitely she would be the runaway winner in there. I also, having not given consideration to her, I do. So it was really easy to kick Hayley Preen out of the race when it all came down to it, because between the 2 Lifetime Grand Prix contenders, Cécile was both from a performance and excitement perspective ahead. And then with Annika Langward and her, that was a much tougher decision for me. I think performance-wise, it's pretty close. I had Annika a tad higher than I had Cécile, because Santa Val was so dominant. I mean, later in the year, she had good results, but nothing that even came close to this Santa Val moment. In terms of excitement, I think the peak probably higher for Annika. The endured level of excitement generated, that is where I see Cécile ahead of Annika. And then, well, it's a newcomer award. And yes, Annika is a newcomer to gravel, but really that is supposed to reward the newer faces, and that is why I ended up giving it to Cécile. But also, if you told me, look, it has to be Annika, I would fully understand it.
Sure, no, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Where do you want to go next?
I mean, let's keep the MVP, most valuable rider thing in the back pocket for a little longer, and maybe let's talk teams. Teams are coming to gravel. It's one of the main storylines of this season, will continue to be so next year. Go ahead.
I think this was the hardest question on both genders to answer for me. I think next year it might be one of the easiest questions to answer because I think the super teams are definitely coming, or at least one super team is coming that's not official yet. And I just hear a lot of rumors in the other conversations I'm in. But yeah, the team thing was starting to happen more this year. You just had to look around like the parking lot before races, as dumb as that sounds. Like I remember at Gravel Worlds this year in Nebraska, Lauf Gravel Worlds. Sorry, I'll keep saying that. I'm not talking about the UCI one.
Hey, I give you the update on the nomenclature there because I solved it. So
okay.
Gravel Worlds is Lauf Gravel Worlds, and the UCI Gravel World Championships shall be called or abbreviated as World Champs.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So at Lauf Gravel Worlds, I remember just looking around the parking lot and like the Panormal team was in one, like a huge group of them. Over here was like Trek Driftless, and there were all these pockets of teams. And again, I use that loosely because this year they didn't always operate, especially didn't always operate as a team. It was just like, hey, we're all in the same kit. I mean, by that measure, like Lunchbox, the team chases on with one other person. Like they worked in situations like a team this year. And so I think it was much harder this year to make this differentiation. However, I can totally see next year, like, I think Lunchbox is going to have 4 riders now. And I know that there's a rumored super team and there's a couple like small teams going away. So I think it's going to drastically change. And I think the racing is going to be very different next year. And I think there's much more going to be times where team tactics of like, hey, my guy's up the road or my lady's up the road, I'm not helping, is going to start to play out more than we've ever seen before. And I don't know if that's exciting or terrifying or somewhere in the middle, but did you have like a short list? Because I had, on the men's side, in my mind, I had 3 that I could really like nail down as impacting how the races played out. Yeah. I'll just go through my 3 real quick. I had Trek Driftless, which is Russell and Torbjorn or Toby, and they worked together quite well. With Toby ending up in the, near the top of the Grand Prix. I had Hit Squad because I got to see a lot of, although it's only, again, it's 2 people. And although a lot of times you just see Keegan and all the work that's happening, forgive me because I can't think of the other person's name.
Tobin Ortenblad?
Yes. Yeah. Don't ever have a bad bike crash where you injure your brain because some things just never come back. But Tobin, there were so many races where I was at and I saw Tobin just working on the front or working to pull something back for Keegan. And I don't think Tobin gets enough credit for all of the success that Keegan has. And then the third one, obviously, like I said.
And just to jump in there real quick, I mean, just if you think about Little Sugar, I don't recall how many times there were wheel and equipment swaps between Keegan and Tobin at Little Sugar. But without Tobin's presence and willingness to be there on behalf of Keegan, he would have had no shot at Big Sugar Keegan to win the series overall, which he still had.
Yeah.
So highly, highly valuable teammate.
Well, and with Tobin, I can't imagine how miserable his racing experience is because he literally in these like, and I would say this right to his face. Like if I ever get to talk with him, that's going to be one of my questions. Like, how miserable of experience do you have? Because he basically like goes until he blows in these 150 and 200-mile races. And when he's done, there's nothing left. And he's still a lot of times, like at Gravel Worlds, I think he had like 40 miles to go when he finally just like cracked spectacularly. So he is a true worker for Keegan. And my third team I had on the list is just the one I got to be the most inside of, and that was Lunchbox Racing with Drew Dillman and Chase Wark. And they did always have plans to work together. Didn't always work out, but especially at Lauf Gravel Worlds, they end up in a break with Nathan Spratt, and they kind of worked Nathan over by the end of it. And they were able to get those last two spots in the money. So those were my picks for top team on the men's side. How about you?
Well, so
I know I left off Specialized. And everybody can calm down.
So Specialized, like, but I'm not. So the Specialized setup is a bit, at least the one that we have this year, is not always super clear to me. We have like the Specialized off-road racing factory team, and then at Gravel Burn there was also the Specialized Toyota, which I don't think it's the same thing, but then also they were all domestiquing for Matt Beers there. And then there was a third Specialized sponsor team which did not, but so that was a bit confusing. But they were on the list, but then also just a brief consideration, to be honest, because there was not like so much actual teamwork going on. But then also warrants the question: what should we value here? Are we looking for teams who actually performed well as a team, or should we look for the teams that had collectively among their roster the best results of the season, or anywhere in between? And like from a pure results standpoint, I think Power Racing needs to be on the list, because I mean at a Trucker they almost swept the 200 and 360. The only one not on their squad was Sophia. And they were super successful in many races, obviously. And now I'm talking like women's men's side, they need to be on both. Actually, like the 1-2 at Unbound with the Cargo and Cecily Decker. Cecily's placement there, even though Pa never really did team tactics and maybe shouldn't even in its current iteration qualify fully as a team, because people still have their own sponsors, including bike sponsors, and therefore goals, and there was limited cooperation, but then they race in the kit and are very recognizable. So again, what do we value? I had staying on the man side for a second, because I think that was what you were talking about. So Pa is on there, Specialized is on there. I have the Castelli sock, which is not a team, more collective. They don't even wear one kit, but they have all these. And I think Classified Rose needs to be on the team as well, because Classified Rose is one of the few teams. They had Thomas DeGent, they had Toby Perry, and a few other guys with a road background. And I remember after the Hills, which Toby Perry won, they told me how they previewed certain sections as a team, and while they didn't, like they had no proper domestiques, but they approached various situations during the year more as a team than others did. And talking of Rose or Rose bikes, as a German would call them, there is also the Rose Racing Circle. Their claim, I don't know if you even know them. it's probably a deep cut, but they are more or less the factory racing team of Rose bikes. They have guys like Lukas Pöstelberger, former
Sure.
World Tour racer who made a strong showing at Gravel Burn this year. They have Frederik Rassmann, who in 2024 crossed the line of the Trucker 200 first and then got DQ'd after a bit of drama because an illegal feed, or not, he got relegated actually, but ended up not winning the race because of an illegal hydration or feed pickup somewhere. Anyway, so they have a good squad. Their claim is vibes-based performance. And the entire presentation, like if you compare them to classified rows, the latter is very road-coded in their presentation, in their approach. And I think Rose Racing Circle, super gravel-coded in everything they do. They figured out how to communicate to a gravel audience and still have a pretty solid squad that does well in races, mostly of the European variety. Yeah, and these are my shortlist. So where did you end up?
So I ended up with Trek Driftless. I didn't include Pas Normal because, like you said, it's kind of hard to tell what they are. Like they're all in the same kit, but they're all different sponsors. And I remember being at a dinner this year with one of the riders, and they basically said, like, we're all in the same kit and we get help with travel. So we're all in the same house. And that's kind of where it ends. I'm really curious to see if that changes in the coming year. Like with,
I mean, in the case of Pa, it will, because they will pay salaries.
Okay. Yeah. And so I look now at the number of on the men's side all of a sudden that are in the Grand Prix, and yeah, I'm really curious to see how that changes. But I picked Trek Driftless this year because of the work that they did together, and then where Toby ended up at the end of the day in the Lifetime Grand Prix.
And I think at Big Sugar, they did do proper successful teamwork, right? Because like he was not having a great day, and then they kept him around. So
yeah,
it definitely qualifies.
Yeah.
I mean, I ended up picking based on results, and then Pa Racing is the place
clear
to be.
winner. Yeah.
But yeah, I can see either case, to be honest. It's not that clear cut. And next year, like you alluded to, this will be really interesting because so much is going to change on the team front. I mean, I wrote this week on Escape Collective about like the alleged Keegan to Specialized rumors that are out there. But even besides this, like what's going to happen on all different ends, like at Canyon, at Trek Driftless, and so on, the team landscape will change, and the concepts also will change. Like you talked about Lunchbox Racing having 4 riders next season. Chase already told me this as well, and even the approaches to teams is so interesting. Like, will we have like more mountain bike factory teams? Will collectives of privateers who start their own teams? Is that the best model for gravel? Are we gonna see more road teams building out gravel programs, like the two-door play, for instance? All very interesting times for this end. Well, to keep it short on the women's side, I did not have any other teams on my list, though I didn't have some of the teams on the women's side, and I also went for Pa for the same reason. They just this year dominated in terms of performance. Who did you end up picking on the women's side?
That's who I had as well, and I know that like that speaks in the face of what I just said that I was told by one of the men. But when I watched the women's racing, there seemed to be a lot more commitment to working together from the Pa riders, and then the results came because of it. So, and yeah, there also weren't a lot of teams on the women's side in the way that there are on the men's. So again, I think that's going to change. Partly as more and more money comes into this sport, more and more changes are going to be seen because evolution is going to be necessary to go chase that money. Good, bad, or otherwise.
Let's proceed like this. We will talk about the 3 race-related awards: best coverage, best live coverage, and best race. And then we keep the 2 last rider-related, arguably the best ones, the most improved rider and the most valuable rider awards for the end. I want to start with best coverage and best live coverage. I think we can do both of them more or less in one go, just to make clear what the distinction is between the two, if it isn't clear from the name alone. Best live coverage talks about the live coverage, which can take the shape of a online live stream on YouTube, TV coverage, whatever was covered in live. Whereas the best coverage in general means the entire media coverage package, which doesn't have to, but of course can include live coverage as well. But you also qualify if you have like Instagram coverage of your race, the highlight, the recap videos, whatever. On that note, best coverage, who did you consider?
Traka obviously is up there. And I basically had the big 2, and that's Traka and that's Unbound. I look at both of them, and again, this is like all coverage, right? So it's not just the live stream. So I look at those 2. Obviously, the Lifetime Grand Prix does really good post coverage where you can go find it. The social's pretty good. I think Traka and the Gravel Earth series this past year had the best post coverage as well. For like, their like highlight video that would come out, and they turned it so fast. It was unbelievable how fast they would turn these. Those were really good. And so this was kind of a toss-up between Unbound and the Traka to me. And I just picked Unbound because I felt like a lot of their Instagram and their stuff race day total package was just a little bit better than the Traka. But both of them offer really good race coverage. If you want to go find stuff, if you want to go watch stuff after the fact, if you want to go watch the full race, or you want to go watch the half-hour version, both of them offer really good stuff. And I just thought Unbound had the nod a little bit in the end with some of their social stuff that they did.
I had both of these on my list, but none was the winner of my best coverage vote.
Okay.
I also considered Gravel Burn in best coverage because the way they presented the race, especially in their like the YouTube videos that we know, by the way, they are made for TV, and that is also why they have this weird or weird, if you don't know, start in the beginning where they always talk about the stage from the day prior first, and then about the actual stage that the video is about. It's because it's shown on TV, and that because TV obviously works different than YouTube does, they do it like this. They had a very strong presentation package as well, but I ended up to give my vote to Core 4. And the reason why
is this because Holy Spirit's sitting in the side by side?
Yeah, and Amanda as well. And I think the one thing that this showed and that Core 4 understood is the coverage needs to be authentic to the space. And I would say, so everything that Classmark does in terms of live streams where they have, and also the other content where they use Maya Noriega as like the presenter. She is also very deep in particular in the European gravel scene, well connected to the riders, and she definitely falls in the same vein. But I just found the entire concept and the idea to say, look, we don't even do a live stream, but we invite two trusted voices, credible voices from the community to do our Instagram footage. And I mean, the profile of the race, I think if you ask the global gravel community, rose significantly. So it was a super smart marketing move, and it was just fun to follow it. And they knew what they were talking about. And sadly, that cannot be said about all the people who present gravel races. No. And this even goes, and I will just say it, like even the people who do it for lifetime, they do not know nothing, but the times they don't recognize riders based on the jerseys, that should be obvious. I mean, I don't recognize all the riders in all scenarios, but some stuff is just an oversight. And yeah, long story short, they got my pick for best coverage. Best live coverage, obviously a different animal. Again, and I think you will also have Unbound and Trucker, the Trucker 360 specifically, because it's the only live streamed the Trucker race on there. I also put Big Sugar on my short list because I felt like between Unbound, their second live streamed race, if I remember correctly, I think Sea Otter was already produced live. Then Unbound, the big one, and Unbound, I have particularly on there because what made it so good and so enjoyable was the fact that Payson was on there because he was injured. And that made it a very good live stream, which again speaks to the point that I made regarding Core 4. You need voices who are authentic. Like in basketball, of course, having a good play-by-play guy is helpful, but the color commentator makes or breaks the broadcast. And if you have the best ones in the game, like now I'm blanking here, the Coach Brothers what are they called?
I haven't watched the NBA in like 10 years, Thomas.
Okay, so I'm asking the wrong guy. Well, anyways, so that is the color guys are very, very important.
Absolutely.
And that was great about Unbound. But I felt overall at Big Sugar, even though it was shortened and so on, it felt like the crew had gotten better at it. And that is why I put it on there. I also do have, and that is the one where I ended up on, now I gave it away, Lauf Gravel Worlds. And Lauf Gravel Worlds, like they start in the dark and then it's a pretty long race and it could be boring. And to be fair, their announcers also like okay, they have two sets of announcers. They have Amanda and I forgot the other guys. Yeah.
Yuri Huschel.
Yeah, and they are on the field and or down on the course, and they are, of course, very knowledgeable and know what they are talking about. And then the actual broadcast crew that is announcing on the live stream, they have more of a triathlon background, and that is why people in the chat got annoyed because they were talking so much about the athlete instead of the racer. So it was a bit triathlon coded. They also didn't recognize all the people, but just the overall production and the fun for the coverage in my book was the highest, even though I think you can make good cases for all of them.
So that was your Lauf Gravel Worlds was your pick in the end.
Yes.
Yeah, that was mine as well. Obviously, what the Lifetime Grand Prix, I shouldn't say that because not all their races are broadcast. What Unbound has done in the last few years is leaps and bounds better than what it was a few years ago. And they've found a way to do it. Tracker 360, very good coverage. Like I said, they didn't have the most like thrilling men's race to cover, but the coverage was really good. And like, I should say, I have like a live event background as well as the film stuff. Like, so I kind of am always like extra judgmental of live streams of what it can be or what it could be. And like you said, announcing too, like announcing matters, how knowledgeable you are, how much you bring in, where you bring in people to be alongside you announcing, that matters. And so I also picked Lauf Gravel Worlds partly because I just saw how they utilized Amanda and Yuri on the ground. And like there were times where Amanda wasn't at the MMR and Yuri wasn't at the MMR where everything just imploded. So those of us who have their phone numbers were like texting them like, hey, this just went crazy sideways. And the next time you see them, there's going to be like 8 guys in the group or 10 people, whatever it was. So there was a lot of like cool integration of them and the information with the other media people on the ground. And then the coverage itself was just so like the footage was good. You didn't have signals being dropped the whole time. And partly that's Jason and Sophia at Lauf Gravel Worlds have worked really hard to utilize Starlink, utilize all those things they need to, so that they like the motos that pulled out right before the race look just like the motos in the Tour de France with all their satellite stuff and ready to go. And it was just such a well done race package. And like you said, the first 30 minutes is like, oh my gosh, this is boring because it's just like a bunch of people riding in the dark and you can't.
But it looked so good, to be honest. I found already it looked so good. Like the production quality wise, it was up there, and probably some locations of the other races are at a disadvantage because they cannot get the same amount of data for like whatever the 4K quality or so out there. I don't know. And like maybe I'm misremembering, but I think even like the graphics they had for the live stream, this looked all very good and polished, but also not overly polished. Like my ideal live stream is taking the best stuff from road racing production, like for instance accurate time gaps and good visuals, but still adapts it to gravel, which is a bit more loose, which is more fun. And then obviously you need to have the knowledgeable people like Yuri, like Amanda, who are part of the broadcast. And they did a great job at it.
Yeah, 100%. And the one criticism I heard of Lauf Gravel Worlds was like, oh, they missed all the points where the race just like exploded early on in those muddy sections. They missed it. And all of us that were on the ground was like, yeah, everybody other than us in the ditch missed it because you couldn't drive there. Like even the riders couldn't drive. So it's a little bit like those years at Unbound where people end up walking for 5 miles and they're mad that you miss it. And it's like, well, okay, unless you had a helicopter, which now at Unbound they do, unless you have a helicopter going, you're going to miss those things. And so I just thought the coverage on the day was so good. And the only reason they didn't really set themselves apart for best overall race coverage is they don't provide as much after the fact. They don't produce those big, like 30-minute, 1-hour packages afterwards with the storytelling. So,
yeah. Best race.
Let me go to I had, there's a couple. I mean, we're talking about a very small handful at this point. Big Sugar might have had great coverage. It was abysmal to watch, like the race itself. It was quite boring. The pros didn't quite know how to handle the short distance. So some of those races that normally are just like, Big Sugar is usually just a banger, like every year. And I didn't feel like it was, and maybe you did, and that's fine. But for me, it came back down to both the races at Lauf Gravel Worlds this year were like these slow attritional races where we eventually get 2 people and they end up having to sprint each other. And it was just very exciting, both watching it, if you were a fan watching it, or if you got to be on the ground and see it just kind of play out in this like slow motion boxing match. I felt that was the best race because I always want to race to, we talked about Haley Batten and like just a juggernaut performance. That doesn't make a good race for me. A good race for me is when you have good competition to the bitter end. And both of those races at Lauf Gravel Worlds this year had that. And so that's where I landed. And I didn't really have a short list. To me, it was just like, this is the one that I always thought of.
It's on my rather short list. Trucker 360, especially the women's race, was another one because I enjoyed it. I think it was a very cool race, but I have a different winner, and that is Gravel Burn, which may be due to the fact that, and maybe it's like an apples to oranges comparison that we are doing here if we take stage races and one-day races in the same bucket, but I think it's fair to do so. And even though we didn't get the live stream, the way they produced everything around it, and also factoring in what I heard from the riders who were there, how they liked the experience, and that goes for the pros and the normies alike. But then also as a fan, how you were able to follow it and how it played out, it was just the most, to me, it was the most fun I had all season. And that is probably also due to the fact that the trend, we talked about teams already, but one in lack of teams, and especially domestiques in teams, we saw a lot of these early breakaways winning the races in the most important races, and a lot of solo or small breakaway victories, which is not as exciting to watch. And then Gravel Burn had like a lot of dynamic racing, a lot of different stage wins, and that is why, to me, I had to give it to them.
I think that's a total fair pick because it was pretty exciting, and stage races, like we've said, can hold our attention far longer than these one-day events.
What do you think? Do you think we need more stage races in gravel? Or do you think that those that we have will become bigger in terms of what they mean in the sport?
Yeah, I think the latter, because I think more gets really difficult. It's kind of like the conversation we're hearing a lot is like the pros should be on a different day than the normies, right? And while some races like Mid-South are able to pull it off, and that's, because Bobby Wintel's like the cosplay mayor of Stillwater, Oklahoma. I think for a lot of these organizations to lock down one day for a race, the idea of locking down 4 or 5 days for a race, and the logistics of that is really challenging. And so it's going to take either huge organizations to pull it off. Because like, am I mistaken that Gravel Burn is put on by like some big conglomerate that is tangential to Cape Epic or something down there? Like,
I mean, it's the founders of Cape Epic. They sold Cape Epic a few years ago, and it's like Kevin Vermaak and many of the people on the Gravel Burn team used to be on the Cape Epic team. So they definitely know what they are doing, and they also have with the NetBank title sponsorship and so on. They have resources.
Yeah, it's gonna take gravel stage racing is gonna take people with huge resources and a huge name to be able to pull in a field where they can actually make money. Like that's just the reality of it. And like hosting a one-day race where it might take you a year or two to get into where you're making money, that's much more doable than like, hey, we're going to do this 5-day stage race or 4-day stage race, and we're bankrupt after the first year because we didn't get enough people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like if what I heard about the logistics of Gravel Burn is just so impressive. Like for the base camps that they did, they had 2 setups of the infrastructure. So all the tents and the stuff, they had little boxes with chargers that they could transport, and all the catering stuff. So and all this they had twice, because like you say, you started with a setup 1 on day 1, then there was a completely different setup for day 2, right. And then they unpacked it, moved it to for the day after next. So yeah, and that
it's like a music tour.
Exactly.
It's like a music tour. Yeah. And I know. So Chase has his races that he runs, and now this year he's developed it into a series, and with like a big payout on offer. And just seeing that's taken him like 2 years to get it to that point where he could even move it into a series. And then the idea of moving it into a stage race is like you said, if you're going to have this and you're going to take care of the people, it is a logistics nightmare. So
yeah. And much easier to do in remote locations, I reckon, than in
yes,
Central Europe, for instance.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's jump to most improved rider, shall we?
Yeah.
Tell me who you had on the men's side.
Okay. Most improved. I had Torbjorn Road. I know that he was in the mix last year, but he, vaulted up. I will say this, like at the beginning of the year, he was a name that people, whenever people come on my podcast, the Stable Cyclist podcast, I ask them after the fact, who should I have on as a future guest? And they'll give me like 3 names. And his name came up a lot at the end of last year into the beginning of this year. And everybody was like, he's kind of an up and comer. Like he's kind of like this new guy that's really interesting. And he finishes 3rd on the year in the series. And by the end of the year, I don't think anybody was looking at him as like a up and comer. It was just like, this is one of the dudes. And he was, kind of the bosses in the group in the peloton when they'd be rolling. So
yeah,
he was my person on the men's side.
He's on my list as well. When I looked at especially the season over season comparison, it appeared to me like especially the progress he made in the Grand Prix was mostly due to the fact that he focused more on it. So last year he didn't do 2 races of the series, and I'm not sure that it was for injury reasons. Maybe it was, but he also did a fair amount of UCI racing and some other racing last year still. And this year it really looked like he focused on the Lifetime Grand Prix completely. And in terms of results, so he made progress in terms of consistency, but maybe not in terms of his peak performance level, is how I summarized it when I wrote about this. Another guy that I gave at least brief consideration to, even though it will surprise you to have his name on here, is Alexei Vermeulen. Last year, he was 11th in the Grand Prix. So he made a considerable jump this year. And I think much like I said with Torbjorn, it was more a matter of consistency, even though I think, for instance, his Leadville result this year was a lot better than what he did there last year. I don't think that he reached a whole nother level performance-wise, but again, he and that's an interesting question here. If we talk about improved, do we think about like improvement in terms of results or improvement in terms of performances? Because in cycling, you can have much growth on one side without having it on the other. Another name that I had on this list, and spoiler alert, it's also the one that I gave my vote to eventually, is a certain Cam Jones. He, like, I heard people mentioning his name before this season occasionally, much like you explained with Torbjorn.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was already good last season, definitely. I found it very interesting, like after he won Unbound this year, he told the story of how his normalized power was even bigger in 2024 than it was this year, but he had understood how to race it, and that is why he went on the attack early and did it like this. And I think another race where you can compare season over season quite well is Oregon Trail, which last year he also raced and he finished in 4th. And especially on like the harder, more climbing heavy stages, he finished more like in like 7th or 8th place. Whereas this year, where he won, he was still 2nd or 3rd on these stages. And I remember, because I had Skylar Taylor on after the race, he talked a lot about like how great he was at descending, which obviously Cam, being a mountain biker, is very good at. But also in direct comparison, you saw that he, like on the heavier climbing days, he managed to drop by not that much that he could get it back when he descended. And so I think Cam not only did have better results, and certainly he did have the better results because also he learned how to race these races last season, but I think also performance-wise, he just put it all together and had a breakthrough. Yeah, and that is why I ended up giving this award to him, or my vote, I should say.
Fair enough. On the women's side, I thought about a couple people. Again, you mentioned earlier, sometimes most improved isn't just about like your final standing. Sometimes it's about the performances you had. I thought Melissa Rollins had a tremendous, I know she finished, I believe, 2nd in 2024 in the overall. So this is like, well, she didn't win it this year, but she was much more prominent, I felt, in the races. And just a name that was out front late. But the other name that I thought of a lot this year was Cecily Decker, who jumped up like 4 spots. I think she was 8th in 2024. And this year she was 4th in the end, and just really consistently performing well at these races. And a name that we came to recognize as being in the mix all the time. So Cecily Decker was ultimately my pick for most improved rider.
I had her. I mean, she became universally known as Diesel Decker this year, which, like, once you have a nickname that everybody knows and everybody uses, it says something about your stature in the scene. And so definitely a breakthrough year for her. I did, however, end up giving my vote to another rider who I think broke through even more heavy, and that is Axel Dubois-Prévost, who, like last year, she was already pretty solid if you looked at her results. Like a lot of like top 10s at big races, like European Championships with a strong competition and so on. But this year, already at the Trucker 360, with her 2nd place finish, you saw that, oh yeah, now she is hanging with the best of the best. And that throughout the entire season, you saw it. She won multiple UCI races, of course, the French national championships, and in the end of the season, Gravel Burn. And the way she did it against the competition she did it against, that made it to me like throughout the season you saw this upward trajectory. It all culminated there in South Africa, and that is who I had. But I wouldn't fight you about Cecily, because she also had a great season with an improvement in both, I think, performance level, consistency, and all the areas where you want to see somebody grow.
Absolutely.
So we kept the best for last.
Yeah.
The most valuable rider, which I kept abbreviating MVP because just we need to have MVPs, and MVR just doesn't flow. So let's start on the men's side.
Yeah, on the men's side, especially with how the Grand Prix shook out this year, like if we're just looking there, and I know that's very American of me, and I apologize, but if we're just looking there, you got 4 guys all year that are in the mix for it, really, with Simone and Cam and Keegan and Toby. And any of them could make a strong case across the entire year with really strong results. Maybe with the exception of Toby, he didn't have any just like out of the park wins on a big stage, but certainly Keegan and Simone, just for how he raced this year, and then Cam. But I don't know how we cannot give this to Cam Jones. Like in my paradigm, I don't know how I can look at everything that I saw this year and not give it to Cam Jones. He wins Unbound. He wins Little Sugar. He does what he needs to. He essentially wins the group in Big Sugar, regardless of where the placing was. He was, they all knew going into that, whoever of the 4 of us gets first is going to win the Grand Prix, and he made sure he won. But then I think about too, like at Lauf Gravel Worlds. To me, that was one of his more impressive performances. He gets 3rd, outsprints Adam Roberge, I believe, in a group of 2.
Not a bad sprinter.
And Robert, yes. And Roberge tells me afterwards, I don't think he's had water for like the last 4 hours. Because of the way that race is set up, there's no aid stations. And so there's like these big water, like, I don't remember what they call them, water monsters or something. But the riders all kind of play like, poker with each other as far as, are we going to stop at one of these or not? And Cam stopped early, and then nobody stopped the rest of the day. So he just kept going on what he had. And like, obviously for health reasons, that's not the wisest performance, but like, what a hard guy to do that. And then outsprint Roberge at the end. And just throughout the course of the year, he was really impressive in the stuff he was doing. And so for me, he's the men's MVP, or MVR, or however we want to call it.
You asked, how could we not end up giving it to him? Let me try. So
okay, I was gonna say, show me the way.
So one guy that I gave, or I will tell you all the other guys that I gave consideration to. Mats Würz-Schmidt. We talked about him briefly before already. But so he kicked off his proper highlight season at the Trucker 200, where he won, beating Matt Beers, guy you maybe heard before.
Yep.
He won a bunch of UCI races this season as well. He had like this episode, which at Unbound I really think about a lot and mention it maybe too much, but he was in the main group with all the favorites, with Keegan, Ned Beers, and so on. And then he decided, look, now I need to do something, and he started to bridge to the chase group that had Torbjorn and a few other guys at this point. And so Paul Voss was then trying to go with him to the group. And the story that he told me on a podcast later is like, so he managed to, but just hanging on the wheel of Mats and fighting for like his life in the wheel of Mats. The moment they make it to the chase group, Paul is done and dusted, and he can no more, and he drops again. And as we all know, Mats will then be battling for third with Torbjorn and lose to him. But this must have been like a Herculean effort, like after 7, 8, whatever hours of racing whenever they started. It was sadly never broadcast, so I just knew it from time splits, and then I talked with Mats and Paul about this to learn this. But yeah, that was, I think, impressive, because then also all the other favorites who at this point also knew what was going on managed to go with him, or didn't, or choose not to, which would have been a bad choice. As mentioned before, he then went on to win the European Championships in a stacked field. And like, there are other things besides performance that also matter, I think, when we talk about most valuable, like how visible are you, how good are you? And he's just learning. I mean, he came from Israel Premier Tech, the team formerly known as Israel Premier Tech, in the season before, didn't get a contract extension anymore, even though he was like a highly, highly talented road guy. Decided to jump into gravel really more or less last minute. And by now, if you follow him, I think he understood how the game is played. He's a super nice guy, so I think that is also valued. Obviously, he races for Specialized, already made it known that he will remain on Specialized in gravel next season, which, like, in the beginning when I had him after his trucker win on the podcast, he said, yeah, this season is for me like gravel, cool, but also my goal is to show I'm still good enough for the World Tour. And I think he has shown this, but also he likes gravel and the lifestyle even better by now than this. And I also value this side of his campaign. So I think he has a MVP case for sure. Another guy that I have on my short list is a certain Matt Beers. Like, started the season super strong, like winning BWR California, then second at Sea Otter, second at Trucker, like already with pretty great climbing performances. Then he had a bit of bad luck in the middle of his season. But you mentioned Lauf Gravel Worlds. Well, Cam was third, but Matt won it in the sprint against Keegan. Pretty strong performance. And he also, like, he won Rebecca's Private Idaho. Obviously, he won the shortened Big Sugar, and then he went on to win Gravel Burn. So if we think we need to give a lot of consideration to stage racing when we talk about MVP, and at least I don't see a reason not to give decent consideration to this. I think he's one of the best stage racers in gravel. And lastly, there is this guy who didn't win the Grand Prix this year, but did in all prior editions, Keegan Swenson, which, I mean, these are Gravel Awards. So on gravel, he had, and in the description, I also explicitly included what Holy, now also known as Lenny, did call extreme gravel, which is a nomenclature that I like a lot for the races like Leadville, like Schwarmagen, and so on. So he had good gravel performances, and of course he won a rainbow jersey, not on gravel, but on mountain biking, cross-country marathon. But the way I put it, and why at least I think it needs to be considered for most valuable, I said at the time, look, Keegan is now a gravel racer. I know he has a background in mountain biking, but I even heard comments that he himself made, like, he is first and foremost a gravel racer these days and not a mountain biker anymore. And usually we know the story, like, there is the Gravel World Championships, and then the roadies come, they take the rainbow jersey for their team, and there is nothing left for the gravel guys. And he turned it around, and he did the same thing to the mountain bikers, because it was the gravel racer coming to the mountain bike World Championships and winning the rainbow jersey. And that is no small feat. And now it really comes down to, like, what do you value, and what is like, what should we consider most? Do we think like continental championships in fields where you have road professionals, top gravel guys, and so on, like what Mats did, matters? Do you think stage racing, like what Matt has done this season, gets extra boxes? And I think there are good arguments for these two. But in the end, I also ended up giving my vote to Cam Jones, because if you win Unbound and if you win the Lifetime Grand Prix in one season, and the way he did it, and also other races, like thinking about his Little Sugar performance, thinking about his Oregon Trail performance, then yes, you are the MVP in my book.
Yeah, I think your Matt Beers case is the strongest case other than Cam Jones. But that's where, if you had picked Matt, that would have been great. But I would have pushed back on which one of those two guys raises the profile of their brands more with what they're doing. And which one of those guys, because like what Matt did this year, incredible. But the bump that he gave Specialized, who he's been with forever, like he's been with Specialized when he was winning Cape Epic before Keegan was his partner. Back when he was riding with Howard Gratz, they were winning with Specialized. So even if he had won the Grand Prix, does he elevate all of his sponsors? Does he elevate the sport in the way that Cam did by winning the Grand Prix, and what Cam did for Scott? And, and I know some people are going to be like, Scott doesn't need to be elevated like Nino Schurter rode their bikes forever and all these other things. But I just look at how much do these guys elevate what they're working with and who they're working with by accomplishing their results. And that's not to take away from what Matt has done. I got to sit front row at Lauf Gravel Worlds and see him and Keegan battle. It's terrifying to think of those two possibly on the same team in the coming year, especially if you throw Mads in there with them. But I just think Cam puts what he's doing and Scott specifically on the radar in a way that nobody else could do for their brand this year.
And look, something that I wrote in my piece about my MVP ballot is also like, if we talk about value and value for money, I just hope that Cam in his contracts had high bonuses, because if not, his partners got so much value, because let's face it, like Cam, not only did he perform on an absolute elite level, but he also rose from a relative unknown insider pick to a beloved figure in gravel. Like he is, I think in a headline I wrote about after he won is like, I dubbed him the beloved Kiwi, and everybody knows, of course, who is meant, because he's such a humble guy, laid back guy, and his profile rose to, I think, the highest possible levels. People he's now on the level like Keegan, where if you say Cam, everybody knows who you are talking about.
Yeah.
If you no longer lead a surname, you've done it. And
like Madonna.
Yeah, exactly. And so we now have Cam, and I mean, talk about Scott, like at the Hills in Italy earlier this year, I met a little congregation of Scott employees, and they came to research gravel over there because, frankly, you say they don't need to be elevated. Well, in gravel, they kind of do, because I think their gravel bike, they had released 4 years ago or so, and they were not really important in the space, and having an Unbound winner, pays.
Yep. Well, and having the winner of the biggest, most lucrative series in the world pays, so.
The hardest award for me, the hardest decision about who to vote for, however, was the women's MVP.
100%.
Because G. Schreurs did have a really, really strong season, and she only made my honorable mentions column because her strong season didn't cut it. And that was the fault of the first rider that we need to talk about in this context. That is Rosa Maria Klöser, my fellow German racer, former Unbound winner this year, Gravel Earth Series overall winner, winner of the Korn Cup, the Core 4 Lauf Gravel Worlds Double. And like she started the year not too bad. She was like second at the Trucker 200, beaten only by Sophia. She was fourth at Unbound, and everybody remembers how she took the wrong turn just before the sprint started, and still she was managed to get fourth in the sprint for third in a group. I don't know, 4, 5, 6 girls. So that was a good performance. But the stretch where she really handed in her campaign, her resume for the MVP this season was the stretch of racing. So she won a few UCI races. They don't really count much to that end because they don't bring prestige really. And then she did a thing where you knew her form was good. She podiumed the German Road National Championships. She was third there. And we have a few good ladies on the road. And then she went on to win 2 races that, in my book at least, are gravel monuments, namely the Rift and Lauf Gravel World. Core 4 was in between these two. She then did also the German Gravel National Championships. She, if it weren't for her flat tire 7 kilometers before the finish line, she would have won European Championships dominantly. She ended up being third because 500 meters from the finish line, Erika Magnaldi and I think Sophie Wright, I could be wrong there, took her over. That was a very dramatic way to lose it. But then she went on to win the Gravel Earth Series finale, Rancho Gravel, in, by now, the way we know how she wins races. She just rides hard from the get-go, drops everybody, maybe except G, the only one who repeatedly could hang with her, and wins it this way. And then just for good measure, she also threw in another win at a UCI race in Portugal at the end of the year, sadly, because she was like the one woman who is a gravel OG who I think could have at least podiumed the UCI World Champs. Alas, she was sick on the day, and so had to mail it in and DNF the race. I don't think you have any objections to the Rosa case.
No, I don't. I had 2 on my list, and she was one of them.
So who was the other one? I assume I had her as well, but...
Yeah, my other one was Carolina, because my feelings are, if you win the American Super Bowl of gravel and you win the European Super Bowl of gravel, it's really hard to argue that you didn't have the best year for, like, to the 2 most visible races to sponsors and to riders around the world, and you're holding your bike over your head in both finish line photos. If we're talking about value, I don't know how you can provide more value than that.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, she needs to be on this list. And the 2 biggest races that there are in gravel, maybe. So if it would be winnable by a gravel racer, as allegedly next year, then we would have to mention the Gravel Worlds, the World Champs. Messing up my own nomenclature here as well. But yeah, she had this stretch where she won this. She almost looked unbeatable because she did this US trip. She won Gravel Low Course as well and Lost and Found. So that was really strong. Then later in the season, there she had good results, but nothing of the same level anymore.
But do we, like, from a physiology and like a coaching point of view, do we really blame her for being like, that spring you just listed is meteoric? That's unbelievable. And then like, I think you look at just let's say Gravel Locos, Tracker 360, Unbound. You win those 3 in that short amount of time. I think we can all sit here and expect that the rest of your year might have a little bit of a fall off, and we're all going to just nod our head and say, that's kind of expected, I guess.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. And the one thing that I thought is maybe there is something to the fact that many people who prioritize Unbound only do the Tracker 200, which also means it very often has the more stacked field. This year, I think they were relatively even, but you could argue both ways. I mean, with the Tracker 200 being Sophia fighting against Rosa, no slouches. So yeah, which also complicates, I think, her case a little bit, because she won the 360 against good competition and a very long and hard race. But there was, like, while I only have 5 monuments, there are 6 monument winners in gravel, because we have the Tracker 200 and the 360. And for the time being, I will not give either one the advantage, just because of the realities that are. And well, you ask, can we expect differently? No, but that leads to the third rider that is on my short list, and that is Sofia Gomez Villafañe. Because if you look at her, and that is, I almost considered for a moment to just take the screenshot from her Pro Cycling Stats 2025 results, which has like roughly 12 or 13 entries. And you, on first sight, you only see the ones, and then you see one DNF, and there is 1 through 3, a third place and a second place. But besides this, starting with like BWR Arizona, which she won in March, until October, where she won Big Sugar Gravel, she won essentially everything. I mean, the list is maybe a bit longer because it has all the individual stages of Oregon Trail, but she also won all the individual stages of Oregon Trail. And so she second at Sea Otter on a day where she was sick, allegedly, and had Haley Batten, a teammate, more or less teammate, specialized rider, in the front. Then BWR California, in my book, also a monument of gravel, as is the Tracker 200, which she won. Third at Unbound. Then the sweep of the Oregon Trail. Also a sweep of Rebecca's Private Idaho. And then the Big Sugar Gravel. And that is on PCS. You don't have the mountain bike results. So you don't have her Leadville finish. You don't have her win at Little Sugar. So she ended the season just as strong as she started it. And of course, she defended and three-peated the Grand Prix, the Lifetime Grand Prix as well. And so now you have these 3 cases, and I found it incredibly hard to make a decision, because like the girl who won Unbound and the Tracker 360, Rosa Klöser, who had an incredible season, and Sophia, who apparently didn't even make it on your shortlist this year, even though I think she had an incredible season. Where did you end up?
I ended up with Carolina. Again, like as I said with the men, a lot of what I look at for most valuable is going to be what you offer the people who are paying you, what you offer to the scene in general. And I just feel like her winning those 2 races. And it speaks also, like, yeah, she didn't race the 200 at Traca. So essentially she raced like the same distance of Unbound, just a handful of weeks before Unbound. To me, that makes the Unbound performance that much more impressive, because everybody coming out of Unbound always says, oh, the fatigue is in the legs so bad and it's so hard to recover. And she like turned that around very quickly and won Unbound. So yeah, that's who I ended up with. I think your case for Sophia or for Rosa is very strong. And I'm really interested in who you picked.
So the exercise I went through is like I needed to have a bit more structure to find out who this is. And the first thing that I looked at, because of course results are very critical for your MVP case here. So I said, okay, let's look just at wins of like the most prestigious, highest quality wins. So I considered what I have as like gravel monuments and gravel classics in my personal race classification, national and continental championships, world championships, and overall series wins of the big three. So Lifetime Grand Prix, Gravel Earth Series, and UCI. Carolina won 2 monuments. Rosa 2 monuments, namely the Rift and Lauf Gravel Worlds, 1 classic at Rancho, German National Championships, and the Gravel Earth Series overall. And Sophia won 2 monuments, BWR California Trucker 200, 4 classics, BWR Arizona Oregon Trail, which she completely swept, by the way, Rebecca's Private Idaho and Big Sugar, and the Lifetime Grand Prix overall. So in terms of results, if you break it down like this, I have Sophia ahead. Yeah, but you can obviously make the case and say, look, but Caro's wins are the most prestigious that exist in gravel, with the one asterisk that, like, if you say Trucker is the most prestigious, it is not yet clear if Sophia's or even though Classmark wants the 360 to be the top race, but again, like, both won the Trucker between these two. Only one Unbound, and that is Caro, and that is by far the most prestigious race that is winnable for a gravel pro, or has been this season. But then also, I think, we need to consider the value version, that who creates the most value for the brand. And I think between the three, when we look at the visibility that they generated, actually Rosa is the most visible, the most outspoken. She probably has the most active social media game of these three. And I think Sophia is the runner-up, whereas Caro, I mean, I like her a lot. She's super approachable. I had her on the podcast after both her wins, and that is really cool and kind of her to do. But I mean, we are operating at the highest level here, and in this category of visibility, I think the other two have an advantage. And then, well, team, I also thought about it, like in the NBA, which you mentioned before, there is this note, like, who makes their teammates better? And that obviously also exists in cycling. I wonder, did anybody really do this? I mean, Caro did a little bit with the incident of giving water to Cecily Decker, but there was nobody scored big time in this category. And like, when it all came down to it, and it was really hard, but I had to give it to Sophia. I gave it to Sophia, and I believe, if I would have to rank it, that I would have Rosa ever so slightly above Caro, which is insane, because like we didn't do these awards for that many years, but I think if you would look back in 20 years, then if you win the Trucker 360 and Unbound in one season, you would be usually the runaway MVP favorite. And in my book, she's probably third in this list.
Well, and but I think this is what makes this fun, right? Like, there are years where, so again, Spencer and I have been talking a lot about the 2011 road season. Mm-hmm. And Cadel Evans wins the Tour that year, but Philippe Gilbert wins everything. And anything he doesn't win, he's like second or third. So who's the most valuable that year, right? Like, and it's a fun conversation, because we're talking about essentially different things in the same sport. And that's why, and this is in any sport, you talk about most valuable, right? The years where, Michael Jordan should have won MVP every year that he played, basically. Yeah. and yet it went to other people. LeBron James should win MVP in theory pretty much every year he plays, regardless of what you think of him. But he doesn't always, because sometimes we judge other things as more important. And I think some of these other awards, it's more clear cut that, like, I would guess everybody who's voting in this is going to be in the ballpark. I would guess this is going to be, for the most valuable, especially on the women's side, is going to be such a shotgun blast of who's actually the most valuable because we can look at it through so many different lenses. Like you said, Carol wins these 2 monster races, and then Rosa runs the gauntlet of all this stuff. And then equally, Sophia is just like dominant throughout, except for these couple times.
Yeah.
And so all 3 can be made an agreement, and all 3 could be right and wrong in the same argument, which is fun.
Absolutely. And there are no wrong answers. Like if you did, I'm not declaring that you're wrong because you have Caro up there, because yeah, damn, she is this great case. It really comes down to what you value most. And like if we would just think value for the sponsors, then I mean, as a German, I know Rose bikes because I see a lot of them on the road. But I think as an American, how many Rose bikes do you see?
Only the ones that are being ridden at the races by the athletes from Europe.
Exactly. And so I think it from like a brand and sponsorship value, if you think that is the most important in this conversation, then probably Rosa Carolina scores like massive extra points on this end, because the value generated for her bike partner, massive. Yeah, so there are no wrong answers. I'm very curious to see who will end up winning this award in particular. And it speaks to one last thing that I want to mention before I let you go, because I took up a lot of your time, for which I'm, by the way, super grateful. But like this year, between the men's and the women's season, I think the women's racing was overall the more exciting. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even having been on the ground for a lot of the men's scene, as I said, going back and watching things and going back and reading what was happening in the women's races was very different. Things shook out differently. It's kind of been the trend we've seen even at like the Tour de France Femme for a while, where the women's racing is just a lot more dynamic. And yeah, you have these people at the very pointy end with Sophia and Rosa especially, who are just dominating in how it's happening, and those 2 are doing it a little differently, but it's really exciting. And you said like Rosa has this style where she just kind of wears everybody down until there's no one left, or it's just her and G.
Yeah.
But like that's still exciting. I don't know why that's still exciting, because a lot of people would hear that and be like, that sounds boring. But it's been really exciting to watch her race this year, and the way that Sophia does it as well. Like, it's so fun to watch. And yet you still go into every women's race, and I feel the women's race start lines feel like the most open possibilities for what could happen on the day. Whereas the men's, there's kind of a vibe of like, well, it's going to be Keegan or it's going to be Matt. And the idea that you're going to have anything other happen, like part of the reason Cam and Simone and what they did at Unbound was so exciting was because it was like, what is happening? Like, and just in general, Unbound tends to be more exciting because you don't get those typical winners. Whereas like you see the BWR start list and you know, okay, it's probably going to be one of these guys. Or you see even Leadville, it's a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. And on the women's side, regardless of how dominant these ladies are, it is not the case. And it is very unclear every day when a race starts, how is this going to shake out, and in what way is it going to shake out?
I just realized we forgot one award, or not one award. We forgot like the men at the most exciting newcomer category. Yeah, so just as a little throw in, because we are running late here, but who did you have as the most exciting newcomer?
I think there's only one name on this list, and one name on this there's no honorable mention. There's nothing else. There's one name, and that's Simone Palau. I'm butchering his name, I know it, but what he did at Sea Otter kind of opened our eyes to who this guy is. Then he's with Cam. Then at Leadville, he does what he does. Like all season, I could not take my eyes off of this guy, and it was not because he's European or but his just like, I always prefer what I would describe as a swashbuckling style of racer. And you kind of got to have a mindset to do it. And you also have to have the like physiology that you can do this kind of crazy stuff all the time. And he brought it every single time. It never disappointed. So for me, that's the list. This is like the Chasework bike. The most exciting newcomer is Simon Palau.
Look, you are not Euro-coded enough if your list is only him, because you are missing two names that need to be considered. One of them is Magnus Baklaris, overall winner of the Gravel Earth Series, which is probably his most, but also winner of the Rift. Came into the season with a big bang when he shocked the European scene, because much like Annika Langwart did on the women's side, he came to Santa Val, won both days against very elite gravel competition from over here. Won several, like UCI circuit, whatever, we don't even mention this, but then besides Rift, a Monument, he also did very well at races like the World Championship, the World Champs, I should say, where I called him the standard bearer of gravel. He finished in 10th place, which was a strong showing, and there were more results. You can read it all in my post, but he deserves consideration. And the other guy who I think is on the same level, almost exactly the same, whatever, depending on what you value, like Simon, is Mats Würz-Schmidt. Like, how exciting is it to have a very talented roadie coming to the scene in his best years, like not after the career is over. And the way he did it, like the Trucker 200 win against Matt Beers, then his Unbound performance, which was incredible, the European Championship, and he legit, like at Santa Val stage 1, it was his first ever gravel race. So he was just thrown in there. But then you did this Simon Pilot case perfectly. And like all three have a good case. And I ended up doing something that you probably know from politics, which is tactical voting. And because I was sure that many of my fellow jury voters, expert panel, whatever we call it, voters, will vote for Simon, I ended up voting for, and in that same go, nominating Mats, because he definitely deserves consideration for this, because he was performance-wise better than Simon this year. Definitely, like he won races.
Yeah.
Where like Simon did too, like Transcordilleras, this one I butchered. He also won like the Canadian Gravel Earth Series race that was up there. But mostly he got second, including at Gravel Burn, also a great performance, because he really made the potential Matt Beers show into an open race until the very last day. Great guy, adopted, like if it would be like fan favorite, most beloved newcomer award, then Simon, the runaway winner, most likely, I would predict. I don't know if I'm allowed to bet on it. Didn't write this part of the rule book yet, but I would assume he will win the award. But yeah, Mats also has a case.
Yeah, I think that's a fair bet. And like you said, I'm very non-European coded, and I will admit that. There's only so much time in the day to like take in all the results and take in what's happening. But that's why you have a big panel of people, and it's not just one or two of us, thankfully.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is what needs to be done these days, because in the, like, especially when we come to talent discovery and so on, it's just too much. You cannot do it with only one perspective, and we need to bring all these people on, and people in the pelotons, people just out there and so on. But hey, thank you so much. I think it will be interesting to see who is going to run away with these awards. And I'm grateful that you and also all the others who are not on this podcast take the time to think about these questions and cast their votes.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you just being the voice that you are in this space, but also giving me a chance to come on and chat.
Have a good one and talk soon.